All right, Horace, I think we're ready to go, man.
All right, brother.
All right, cool. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Clay, the host of Purpose Driven Pivot. I really appreciate folks that are tuning in for the first time because this is our inaugural interview with a gentleman that I think the world of, and you'll certainly learn more about. It's Horace Williams with the Get Empowered app. Horace, what's up, man? Everything all right on your end?
Hey, brother, man, I appreciate you having me, and everything's good this Sunday.
Good.
Blessed to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So, just a little bit about purpose driven pivot, folks. It really is an opportunity for me to talk with leaders like Horace about how they have pivoted and taken risks really in their life. It was birthed out of an event that I hosted with my fiance, soon to be wife, Shani Wooler, called Power in Our Purpose this summer. And it featured a series of speakers throughout the day that really provided information regarding their respective industries related to social justice and change. And we wanted to be able to continue the conversation. Of course, because of COVID, we know that large gatherings and the way that data has been trending, these opportunities to connect in this virtual space have really become the norm. And so to continue that conversation, connecting with folks like Horace, speakers that have participated in that previous event, and also some folks that, Horace, we know, in addition to our network, I think that this is an awesome time to have this type of dialogue with people like you. It's very, very timely for me because with the elections in our area in Fulton County, Georgia, right around the corner, city of Atlanta, this Tuesday coming up, you've got a very, very powerful application for people to not just stay informed about candidates, but also elected officials. And I think it's really, really phenomenal. Before, Horace, I get you to talk a little bit about Empower and really, I'd say a minute and a half and talk 2 minutes about really introducing yourself. I'll tell you how I know you. For those folks watching and listening, the beautiful thing about the speakers I've got lined up is that I've got a personal relationship with them, whether it be through civics, through politics, or just bumping around Atlanta. And so, Horace and I have been in classrooms together with kids. We've been some great social memories of hanging out, particularly at the Jazz Festival. I remember it may have been the first time, Horace.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
thanks to Jay and Blaine brought us
Yeah,
together.
yeah. Shout out to the Bailey fam. But for those folks that live in Atlanta, it's no secret about Jazz Festival and what it's been to the cultural environment. And so kicking it socially back in the day is one of the things that I remember Horace from. We had a good time, man. Good time on the grass. And one of the things you mentioned, Bailey, I remember us lugging all these tables for an event or something one day for him. You remember that, man? We were lugging tables.
Yeah, that was Dr. Holman.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we were
Dr.
lugging
Keith.
some.
Yeah.
So for Dr. Keith, man, I remember us, man. We were like, look.
Awesome person out here.
Yeah, indeed, with the Village Market. Yep, what up, Dr. Keith? Mm-hmm. And so we've been doing manual labor to teaching the kids, man. It's standing shoulder to shoulder in the trenches for quite some time. But more importantly, man, I believe in what you do, brother. I believe in what you built. You inspire me, man, to really, really be plugged into not just the Atlanta tech market, but just in this space of innovation. And more importantly, Horace, you made it easier for people like me that maneuver in and out of the civic and political space to do our job. Every time I talk about elected representation, I'm mentioning the Empower app as a tool for people to stay connected and stay engaged, man. And so I'm really, really delighted to have you here with me and for our first time viewers, man, as we continue to build this platform out. But I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself to folks out there and tell them a little bit about what you want them to know about you personally and about Empowered App.
Yeah, sure. So appreciate everything that you just mentioned. The great said, name's Horace Williams. I'm originally from New York, born and raised, but I've been in Atlanta long enough where I don't talk about it much unless somebody asks. I started Empowered as a byproduct of, to kind of fast forward through it all. I was an executive at Oracle at a young age, and I've been in tech, particularly around user experience and data analytics for majority of my career. And I started Empowered after the Trayvon Martin situation. What it basically enlightened me to was these outcomes, particularly of social and criminal justice outcomes at the local levels. I didn't have a very strong awareness of how they occurred. And I thought I knew how something was supposed to happen, and it didn't occur that way. And it just kind of made me say, how come with raising children or building a family in a society that I don't understand, particularly with regards to how I'm governed within it? And it made me kind of do my due diligence, and I realized that, even as a successful person, relatively speaking, and looking at my friends and peers in a similar space, like a lot of us, we were so inward facing, we really did not understand our society. We really did not understand what was going on. And that needs to change. So I built Empowered and said, you know what? Worst case scenario, I got two principles. One is that if I walk away from this and it don't work, I'll walk away at a point where I understand how the system works. Yeah. And as a man, that's important to me, a man of my family, and being a leader in my family, that was important. And the other principle I had was I wouldn't fail in the office. And what I meant by that was I didn't care how difficult it got. And you can, we have a mutual friend in Larry Stewart, who's worked with us for a long time.
Hey, shout out to Larry, man. Even if Larry's not on, man, I'm gonna make sure that he checks this out for us.
Oh no,
Larry's an OG to both of us, man. Every time I see him, he's dropping wisdom on me.
Larry's a loyalist, and he's a real estate come out here. And one thing I told Larry from day one, because we joked about it in a lot of capacity, he was like, hey, listen, I'm not going to fail because of administrative reasons, because of staffing reasons, because of capital reasons. Like that's not going to be how this company dies. It's got to die because the market doesn't want it. And I was like, that's the only thing I'll settle for. And that gave me kind of my own encouragement throughout this process and through pivoting in that model, which we'll get into as well, in terms of understanding how to really be a part of the marketplace as a business owner, as a service provider, but then also because of the type of market this is, as a constituent, a genuine constituent, and playing that role. But that's that's the mission on me. I'm 30. I'll be 37 this year. Thank God for all the years I have, considering the times that we're in. And married, beautiful wife, Lorena. And
so I said what's up as well, man.
I sure will. She's out right now doing the hair.
Shout out to all the ladies out there staying fly.
Yeah. So, but all is good though. That's the low on me.
Man, Horace, when you say it's only gonna die if the market doesn't accept it. Like when you came at that intersection, and I also after this question, I want you to talk, more practically about it because I got it up, right? But I want you to be able to kind of tell people practically what we're talking through when it comes to Empower. But that whole notion of it's not going to die because of it. When you came to that intersection, with you sitting by yourself, man, what are some additional thoughts that you could share with folks, man, that might hear that early on in the process?
Sure. So here's the thing, right? Like I came into Empowered from a very unique standpoint. I had already been, even at a young age, just because, and not because, I'm some brilliant guy, sometimes you just get lucky. Yeah. And I had talent. My talent was design. And design led me through this path in life that is, I can never thank God enough for it. But it allowed me to be a key employee in 2 startup acquisitions, back to back. And what I realized in both of those situations, I came in when there was very few people. One time it was 4 people, I think, and the other time it was 14. And the one that was 14 grew to over 250 while I was there. And what happened is that in those times, you realize something. And you realize that people quit because of roadblocks too quickly. And not only do CEOs quit, but staff quits. Yeah. Like they perceive that something's not going to work, or they don't think it's going to work, but they leave instead of trying to maximize their own value in order to make it work. And I think that gave me a realism and a real truthful understanding of the process I was about to step in. And it also taught me that the only thing that matters is the market reception. You know, everything else is just it's opinions, it's fluff, it's, you know, whatever it is. But like when I get on the call with someone like you and you telling me something like, you know, I use this when this, you know, occurs or when I'm doing it, like that's what matters to me.
Yeah.
I can make that work, right? And I can push on that and I can build on that. Now, if everybody was like, you know, I don't know what to use this for, then that's different. But that is how I maintain my focus. It's like, this is the only thing that matters. And in this space, it's a little different. And I'll get into that later. But I want to also kind of hone in on your original thing, which is like telling you a little bit about what Empowered does. Today, Empowered was built in what I would call these 3 pockets, and we'll specify that more when we get into, you know, the pivoting. But the first one was Empowered was built to help people identify who represents them and understand what they do and have the ability to contact them. And that was great when it first came out. We got a lot of, you know, positive reception for that. We even got a lot of press for it. But the reality
now represents them in government, right? So government officials, right?
Yes. So when we talk about representation, we're talking about local to federal.
Yeah.
We're talking about everybody who is elected. And that's the key thing too, because I know that there are people who represent your interests who might be appointed. And one day we might do that. But today,
well, go ahead as you talk, man. I'm just, you know, this is what we do.
But today we focus on people who were elected by constituencies, or particularly you, either directly or indirectly, and we'll get to that another point, that represent you. And we put in your address and we can pull up that list of figures. We tie them to the jurisdiction boundaries that you reside in. And that's how we identify who those people are. And we do it at the municipal level, the county level, the state level, and the federal level. So that was day one. Then we realized we are a facilitator that didn't provide much context. And to kind of bring that into more layman's terms, we gave people the tool to do something, but we didn't tell them why they should do it, right? So there was a lady, her name was Tamara Shilley. I say this every single time. I'm big on mentioning people who've had impacts in some capacity. She called me one day, said, Horace, I love this app. I didn't know who she was. She spoke to me like she known me a million years. And she was like, don't change anything. I run an organization called Beauty and Politics, and we use your app to help people identify who to talk to, you know, at the Capitol. And yeah, I remember I was still new to politics at this point. This is back in 2016, maybe, and the beginning of 2016. And 2 things clicked for me. One is that there are people out here doing the work, and they don't have the resources they need to be as impactful as they should be. And then 2, if people were connected to those folks, that they would have people who can provide the context while we facilitate the process.
Good.
Right? So then the last thing too was, it was beauty and politics, right? So I was like, so there's the barber and hairstyle industry. And I'm a brother, and you know, I'm from New York, and you know, now I cut my own hair because, you know, you taught me about the T-lines. That's another.
Oh yeah, boy, hold on, boy. You stay.
So
yeah, that's a good. Yeah, go ahead.
But basically, what I discovered in that was a microcosm of looking at how legislation and policy impacts every part of our lives, right? Like, I never thought about regulations for barbers, right? Like how they make money and how that is a byproduct of how they charge us, right? Or, you know, hairstylists, like why they have to legally perform those activities in a salon.
Yeah.
Right? People don't correlate these things, that these are all man-made laws within a democracy, which means that we are all part of this process, whether you are active in it or not. So to me, I said, all right, if we can create these dots and we can contextualize how people live into how we connect them to organizations, and then use those organizations to help drive context for why they should be engaged,
right?
And we can facilitate that engagement. So what that did was essentially made Empowered an advocacy platform that also connected people to organizations that had advocacy initiatives to impact policy in some capacity. So that was phase 2. And then phase 3 is when we start going into kind of the elections, and I talk more about the pivots this year in particular, so I won't go too deep in that.
Okay. Now that's top secret information, or we want to
No. I mean, I can go into it now if you want me to. I just didn't know if it was tied into kind of how you had the structure.
No. Let's get into elections because I want to and talk briefly about it because I know that's a part of the pivot piece, right? And so
Oh yes.
just talk briefly about it because I want to know the origin story for that third leg of the stool, you know.
Sure.
But give a context.
So we ended 20. You know, when you want to talk about money, I like to give people the real deal. So Empower's only raised about 170,000 in total, right? Up until recently.
Okay.
And that meant that Horace was doing a lot of bootstrapping, which means I was working, consulting to pull money in to pay people because no one has ever worked for Empower for free. I can tell you, I got the invoices. But what happens is that you start to make revenue. I mean, like our first, our first year, we, you know, kind of failed. We was trying to figure things out. Second year, we had to rebuild. 2018, we got our first client. 2019, we ended the year with 6 figures in contracts. 2020 was rough, and I'll tell you why it was rough. It was rough because we started the year with more momentum than we ever had. And then you come into February and March, and you're taking what was probably the most powerful quarter that we ended the year on or could have ended the year on, and it got crushed.
Yeah.
A lot of money, a lot of how Empower gets paid is through foundations that are giving capital to organizations to pay for these advocacy initiatives, right? And we focus on smaller organizations intentionally because those are the ones I want people to connect to, the local ones, right? The ones that are on their block, down their block, professional organizations that are within their state and all that. So the thing is that we had a lot of contracts that didn't kind of go to the next step because, you know, funding got shifted because of COVID initiatives. So it really hit us hard. But I'm gonna tell you what happened. COVID was nasty to us, but when the riots started, it brought me back personally to that Trayvon Martin place.
Yeah.
But it was different this time because this time people, it's different from now from 2013. And people see what happened and now they want to act on it more aggressively, right? They want something to do. Our adoption, the first day of that, went up 4 times, like basically went up 400%. And I said, oh, okay, people are starting to use our application, but they're creating their own context through current events, not through connecting them to organizations. And what happens is that we had some funding that was kind of in, kind of out there, like we was waiting for it to come in. And literally it came in. And here's a funny thing, and I had and this is very divine for me, Empowered raised enough capital to get us through the rest of this year to elections. And then we still have enough money on the table coming in from some other organizations. You and I talked about this off the record, that will give us a bit more in addition to that. And the first check that we got for all of this, unfortunately, but very spiritually, was on the day that we lost C.T. Vivian and John Lewis. That was the day that we got that first check. I went and picked it up on that day. And that was after we had to make through all the struggle and everything else. But even prior to that, we had a vision. This is where kind of the shift happens. This is kind of controversial, but it is my genuine belief, and it's grown as I've become more immersed in the civic engagement space.
Yeah.
Voting is extremely important. In isolation, without any context, without any information, without any further involvement, without any understanding of the process, both scholastically and how it impacts your neighborhood, voting is useless.
It can be dangerous too. It can be manipulated. But finish your point.
It can be used against us.
Sure.
100%. And I think that where I wanted to do is I saw a lot of people in our peer space and even outside of it. And that's why I say it can be controversial, because I love most of the people that's around us. Everything comes from a place of care and love. So even in disagreement, I understand where it's coming from. But the thing that I realized, particularly with young Black men and women, and other minorities and people who are on the lowest side of the economic spectrum, is You have to meet them where they are
Yeah.
to bring them where they need to be. And you can't guilt trip them into doing things simply because it benefits you.
Yeah.
And what happens is that when I think about how people genuinely and truly become engaged in the process, it typically happens one of two ways. It's either a traumatic thing that brings them into it and brings them into it already with negativity, or they become part of something. And as becoming part of something, they have discovered, the benefits of civic engagement. There is a guy right now that I'm following that, and I got to talk about this brother a little bit because I love what he's doing. His name is Mark Boyd, right? And I'm sure you know about him with the Water Boys here.
Yeah, KD. I was with him, man. I was with him literally yesterday, man.
Yeah, well, I would believe that. I would believe that. Y'all putting in the work, right? So to me, you do something like that, and you see where elected leaders come in. You see, why they need to be involved in the process or how they're involved in the process.
And that's super controversial, man. Not just from the people that say yes and the resources come down, but also the people say no, this shouldn't be. And there's just so much conversation happening in the midst of so many other things. So yeah, but go ahead. Yeah.
And the thing is that like I see that and I say, okay, this is a brother that's got an organization that, as a result of starting it and pushing this forward and doing what he's supposed to be doing, he's getting political involvement. He's getting civic involvement from peers and everything else.
Mm-hmm. And shout out to Casey too. Casey.
Yes, totally. And as a result of it, I'm almost certain that when local elections kick in next year, he's going to know who he needs to vote for, who he doesn't need to vote for. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be intentional. Mm-hmm. Because it's because of the work that he's doing and the impact in communities he's having. He knows who his connection points are, who's been supporting him, so on and so forth. Even me, part of the reason our first year was a failure because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And by that, what I mean is that I had to immerse myself in the process, not just run a business in it. Because one, the thing about the advocacy space is that it's a very, and I'll say this optimistically because I know some people have kind of their feelings on it, but it is a very genuine space. People are doing what they're doing, very intelligent people who are making a lot of more money doing other things, and they're doing it trying to help people pass bills, get policy done so that the communities that they represent can be better. And when you come in there like a salesman, you look crazy. So you really have to come in there with value and then attach that value to something that helps support your business so you can grow and scale. And what happens is that I had to do a few things. One is, and I'll say this first, I volunteered on your campaign, right? Like I was a donor, but then I was also somebody that did calls. I did some of the door walking, but that's an important experience for me. I needed to see what that was like and be a part of those things. I work with my friend, Darshawn Kendrick. Go, you gonna say?
I was even going to say, when it comes to the technical applications that are used to track voters, talk to voters, and connect to voters, just knowing that. I mean, you're as you mentioned, are a UX experience type guy. Just knowing that, and on your phone, you can have, the application there. You can take responses. All of that information is aggregated into one place, and then it can be used not just for a particular candidate, but it could be used for candidates coming behind it. I mean, it's just the way we use and access information in a way that enables people to connect directly with what you just mentioned, the campaigns. Yeah.
No, and see, that's the thing. All of these things, even I even became vice president of the board of my HOA, right? And then worked on the policy side with Darshawn as well. But all these things manifested into where we started to pivot, right? And
I want to add that because I don't want to breeze by that.
Okay.
For folks that are tuned in, from Horace's experience in building what he's built through Empower, his knowledge and information that he's acquired, he's VP of his HOA now. That. It can be hot, man. It can be really hot. But those that series, right? Those connections and conversations that say, hey, you don't have to necessarily just even run for office or work on a campaign. Change happening in your building or on your block, just to say, hey, man, I'm plugging into my HOA, whether it be something related to the fees or the conversations or the safety Like at the very least, I'm plugging in. But that lead by example attitude is something that I want to make sure that we add in a heavy way to this conversation, because it's a very, very practical thing, but it's real too.
Yeah, and that's what it is. Like, you know, when I talk to like some of our early stage investors, I was like, listen, I wish I could have told you this more directly on day one, but you were actually investing in my education more than you were investing in my business. But
Yeah.
you'll be happy you did, because one of the things that, you know, you can't go into this space and not understand it and try to solve it. I think that that is the problem that people do all the time, and in anything, in corporate America or as an entrepreneur. And what I realize is, and this is kind of the thing for us with the next Empowered Act, is empowered always talked about empowered, right? But what is it to feel empowered? It's to feel like you have an impact. They've even done health studies on this, Greg. They got health studies that say that there are health benefits and there are negative health effects that surround people based upon their level of civic engagement or lack thereof. And part of it is just, if you think about anything in this world and your confidence around it and your ability to participate in it and your just general quality of life, it comes from having control over your activities, what's going on, what's happening in your neighborhood. When you don't have control over your life, that's a health hazard. You know, it's a stress hazard. And part of it is owning the fact that when I'm involved, I feel better about myself. I'm more confident about myself. Like, I know what's going on. I know how to help. I know how to participate. So new version of Empower, to run through this, it enables multiple forms of civic engagement. We basically connect people to organizations so that they can volunteer for them, so that they can donate to them, so that they can advocate alongside them, so that they can be informed. We make it, we simplify an ability for people to do things like, you know, petition, to do things like, you know, get engaged and run for office. Like, we build partnership with organizations, and we're continuing to seek them out to build a database so that we can connect people to resources that can jumpstart their engagement based on the life that they currently live and where they live. And one of those key components, particularly in this time, is voting. So from the voting perspective, what we are doing is we are, for 4 states we're aiming for right now, which is Georgia for sure, top down, Texas, North Carolina, and Florida.
Okay.
We are covering polling locations, precincts, every elected official and every candidate for the ballot. Put in your address, we give you all that information. We tell you when you can early vote. We tell you when you know where to go vote. We allow you to check in and send feedback on your actual experience at the voting location. We tell you who's on your ballot and all of that for those places.
Horace, that's a big time pivot. Man, the ability to do what you just mentioned in one place. You know, what was, before you started to practically put that in place?
Yes.
I think the natural thing, the fear or the intimidation around saying, hey, can we be all of these things to all these people? But overcoming that, tell us more about that.
Yeah, so see, here's the thing, and that's where it comes from, the experience of doing this for almost 5 years. You can't impactfully do anything if you don't have awareness of all these things. And the thing, see, because what happens is, I used to say this in the beginning of some of my pitch decks, like in politics, there's no point in a point solution. And by that, what I mean is that when you try to oversimplify these things, this is how we live, this is how we're governed. When you try to oversimplify the delivery of these things and make it ultra high level, it's almost deceptive.
You know what, man? Listen, man, I'm glad you said that, because I find myself, especially nowadays, in these conversations where I'll preface something, when somebody says, to make a long story short, or to, kind of tell people what's coming next. I'll preface some conversations related to politics or policy with, hey, this thing is going to get really complex, or this thing just can't be as simple. And it's so long-winded because you got to go through these many different things that people could either tune out or just say, hey, man, Greg, I don't want to hear that type of stuff. Right? Yeah. So it is really, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's at times where information can be impacted in so many different ways. Like, sometimes a simple answer just doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
And the thing that we do to make it simple, and this is where, like I said, prior to this, I've spent 15 years in user experience. So I don't, I'm better at delivering than I am in talking in many ways, right? So the thing is that when we deliver it, we tie this to when you download that app. Like if you download our app today, we ask you a few questions before you start, one of them being your address. And as a result, when you come to your landing page, we give you, a list of all the elected leaders that represent you. Mm-hmm. We don't just give you every elected official, right? Like there's context, there is personalization. What we do is we try to learn about you first. And then we create an experience for you, a civic engagement experience for you that is curated based upon where we believe you will find the most value. So it's not just this like hazardous information dump that just encompasses everything, because that's not a learning experience. That is a research experience.
Sure.
What we want to do is we want to guide your path into impactful civic engagement. And we want to guide your path into actually being informed and feeling like you're doing something, like genuinely feeling empowered as a result.
So and Horace, man, I'll even share, man, like that guiding your path for folks like us that have been in the space, man, oftentimes there isn't this one destination, even if you can say there's this destination. Because even when you say, hey, on a campaign trail, I supported a candidate, now, the work isn't done. Now this candidate has to go into a space and push policy or continue to do work. And there's even, more examples around, like, for folks that think that, hey, it's more linear rather than cyclical. Like there just aren't these, there are milestones, yes, but there aren't these hard stops to this work, especially when you get frustrated in it, right? Or you say, hey, I'm taking my interest and I'm going home. If you're still living in that neighborhood, you may have stopped going to the HOA meeting or the MDU meeting, but you're still seeing things around you that are changing, right? You may plug back in if you don't move 3 months or 3 years later, right? But there's still this journey or this path that you're on, because you're going to continuously see things happening in your community, right?
Listen, man, one of the things you said at the top of that's so important is it's like there isn't a linear path. And I look at civic engagement as like this theme park wheel, right? Like you get on this where it lands for you, and then you ride the whole thing around. Everybody not getting on at the same seat. And we have to stop doing that, because what we're doing is we're creating this perception that holistic civic engagement is going to the polls. Yeah. And that's nonsense. That is an important piece, but there's a pre part of that, and there's a post part of that, and there's an influence building part of that. There's a part where you are participating in the campaign of somebody who is running. That's volunteering or donating. There's a part where you are going and voting for that person. That is going to the polls on election day. There's a part where you hold them accountable afterwards, which is transparency and the ability to engage them in office. There is a part where they are pushing policy as a result of being in office that you elected them to push. How do you get them to do it? Who do you work with to support them? And how do you hold them accountable if they don't do their job? That is all something that should be centralized. Because you cannot basically say that you are actively participating in the voting process without seeing all of those things as equally important opportunities to engage.
So here's what, man, I didn't know that your pivot that you were mentioning today included all these things, man, to be this clearinghouse for all of these experiences, right? And so not just in being this clearinghouse for all of these experiences, Horace, but the responsibility to help navigate and guide people through that, and the ability for them to not just be empowered with the information, but to be empowered with the advocacy, man. Like, those are the types of transformational pivots in the tech space, in the innovation space, that really, truly change the way people connect with folks. I mean, it's almost as if, you're answering so many questions. That's what I mean. Like, just starting with the information, for me to say, hey, put your address in, and here are your elected officials. You can call these numbers, right? I'll call elected officials' offices from classes you know what I mean, where kids didn't believe me, right? Matter of fact, Larry was in one of those classes. We called the Governor Deal was in office at the time. I'm like, hey, we're calling Governor Deal. We got him on speakerphone. And kids are like, yo, I can't believe we just did that from our elementary school on the south side of Atlanta. But it put in their mind that the information and access is there. Man, this pivot that you're talking about now is a whole different thing. Like,
hey, Greg, I'm gonna tell you something that's crazy. See, and especially when people, because I think the biggest thing, and anybody who's watching, it's this thing that I want you to really understand, because it sounds like a lot, but it isn't. One of the reasons that we could confidently go down this path is, one, I'm gonna tell you this is just the reality of it is, Empowered has always been an advocacy app. And if you're thinking about data and facilitation, that's probably one of the more complex things that has to occur. So most people aren't even in the advocacy space, never mind trying to facilitate communications between individuals and elected leaders from local level to federal level. That's a data exercise most folks don't want to be a part of. But Empowered has mastered how we collect data, manage data, master data, and we have scalable data teams, and we just own that particular piece. So anything else is just more data. It's just a question of how do we surface it? So the next piece here is, and this is something a lot of people don't know. When you register for Empowered, we ask you what causes do you care about. Now, if you're in a certain region and you select certain causes, then once you are done, you show up to the main screen, your homepage, there's a pop-up that'll say, based upon the causes you selected, we believe you should join this organization or follow this organization. It doesn't happen in many instances because we kind of done with a niche group and some niche regions and with some niche partners, but we have a 33% conversion rate on that, which is unheard of.
That's
and what happens is, it's great. It's like, listen, it's the issue we have is our organization partners don't produce enough content for those users, which is why we're shifting the model a little bit. But see, when people think about too much going on, we already do that in some capacity today.
Man, and as a consultant in the space, right, that consults organizations, nonprofits, you know, walking through providing and enhancing content is oftentimes part of those conversations, because even for where you are on it, I'm catching up to mentally where you're kind of taking the dialogue, right?
Yeah.
But not just the dialogue, where you're taking folks' actions and interests. If our organizations aren't providing enough content and keeping people engaged and informed and saying, hey, we know you were with us last summer, but this is how we need you this summer. Bro, like that fall off, that drop.
Man, listen, that is the one thing when I talk to organizations, I always tell people, Empowered makes a lot, we can make a lot of money off of selfish organizations, because the thing is that the most effective, cost-effective way and the most impactful way to keep your supporters engaged is through ecosystem. If you have me or yourself, and we are in a place where we are part of 5 or 6 or 10 organizations, and if I'm in that room and there's only one that's talking to me every day, when they stop and leave, then I leave the room too. And then when they come back and they don't see me there, they're like, well, what happened? Well, you stopped talking to me. But if I walk into that room and every day another organization is coming into that room talking to me, it doesn't matter when you come back because I'm still in the room. So when you come back, I'm still there, you can engage me. That is what we do. That's how we solve the content issue. Whereas you are if my life is one where I have a dog that I care about, I should be supporting the ASPCA. I'm a Black man, and there's the Black Lives Matter is an option. You know, my sister's part of the LGBT community. That is I need a local organization around that I can support. These are like multiple organizations that shouldn't have isolated mechanisms for supporting me through some single channel.
That's huge, because we know that the message and the work that they do, man, it's not quarterly, man, it's hourly. There's this, when we talk about, let's say, you know, equity in Atlanta, or specifically, let's talk housing, right? Let's drill down housing.
Yes.
If housing is a challenge for you, you're not thinking about that every month, whether the rent or the mortgage is due. Bro, you're thinking about that every time you walk through the door, every time you wake up, every time you, man, and when you talk about those stressors, right? And so even in the mix of that, how do I, if I'm an advocate for housing and it's not
Yeah.
necessarily impacting me directly, or if I'm an advocate for housing and I'm in that loop every day, if Empowered isn't pivoting the way that they're pivoting to be that clearinghouse, man, it's kind of good luck, man. I love the efficiency around it, man. I
Yeah.
really, really do.
Listen, I've spoken to, and this is a byproduct of tons of research, right? Like, because we're going hard or going home on this one. So there's been a lot of there's been a lot invested in this.
Put a pin in that. I want to bring that back before we get into another line of questions and conclude. That we going hard or going home. I want to jump through the screen right now. Go ahead. Go ahead, though. It doesn't appear that way, but go.
My wife loves me, but she don't love me where I can go ahead and run this down here forever, right? So
hey, you and me both.
So, but the thing is that like even when you look at the way organizations function for like activations and things along those lines, or anything else along, there is an inherent collaborative nature that is necessary to get more people to show up, to get more people to support, to get more people to donate. The problem is that the continuum of their communications need to leverage that same collaborative model. And what happens is if you do that, then you're able to share the burden of engagement that drives support from the individual constituent and whomever. And then you know what else gets to happen then? Those people who are supporting you, they become more involved in the process because they look at the issue that you are trying to tackle. And then they look at the elected leaders who are either supporting you or helping you or pushing you, or the ones that are roadblocking you.
It's sometimes the enemy can be bad legislation out of people to break through that legislation. 100%. Man, like there's being in the South and being Southern around, we think of, post Civil Rights Act, man, so many different types of policies connected to other things that still trigger not just emotions, but trigger economical things, there's so many different things. That policy can sometimes be one of the biggest burdens, knowing that elected leaders have to tackle it too, right?
Absolutely. And I think that when you bring it into this kind of capacity, what it also does too for elected leaders is it allows them to, and this is kind of something I come up with, and I'll kind of stop here so we can kind of circle back with some of the other things we want to reach before we close. But one of the things that this model does is it creates what I like to call the societal middle manager.
Societal middle manager.
Yes. So what happens is that when you're engaging elected officials, you should always, your ability to engage them impactfully is heavily tied to your engagement in the community at the moment. Sure. Right? Listen, if you ever engage in elected officials, at some point, particularly local, they want to know, well, have you spoke to your NPU? Have you spoke to your neighborhood association? Have you spoke to all these other things? Like, these are tiers, right? Now, what happens is that what that does for elected leaders as well is it gives them a layer of people that they can address and deal with directly and support that are already representing cohorts of their constituency. So what it does is it creates basically some process, and that process further empowers the constituent because they're becoming informed. They're joining something that is either an infrastructure that's been in place or something they can help. By the way, looking at some of these small organizations, like before creating your own, like there's a million small orgs out here that need board members, that just need some money, that need some donors that have already started the process you can collaborate with and help. And you can both inherently is through that collaboration further build your influence. Mm-hmm. But what that does is that that doesn't just empower the constituent, it also streamlines the communication efforts for elected officials to deal with their constituency bases. And what that does is that altogether, in my perfect world of civic engagement and alignment, is it creates this ecosystem across organizations, corporations, and constituents, and it allows us to have a really true democratic system that if people are connected to the resources and the context they need, then they can really leverage their influence and grow in their influence as constituents.
Yeah.
And I think that that is where like true democracy, the power of true democracy relies. So that is what Empowered is centering itself on, particularly in this upcoming release and as we continue to grow moving forward.
Man, that's awesome, man. That genuine feedback loop that becomes a byproduct of everything that you're doing. And I wouldn't say the feedback loop is the only part, right? I'd say that it's in addition to so many other things, Horace.
Yeah.
Being able to discern what's real, like the pulse of a community. Oftentimes when we're even talking with elected officials about, hey, Greg, is this a big deal or not? Capturing that pulse and just talking to a handful of people sometimes, you could miss the mark. You could miss the mark, and that'll be the decision. I mean, that'll be the
100%.
difference between pushing a policy at the top of the year or the end of the year. Or that could be a conversation that needs to happen an hour from now, going into Monday, versus, you know, one that should have happened a month ago, right? And so there's so many different things that come to mind for us when you mention that.
Mark Boyd has turned them water boys into future active constituents. Because he formed an organization, brought them in, and now they are on path, whether they know it now at their age today, or they'll find that out later. They have been exposed to that. They have
physically introduced them to City Hall and people, physically. And I mean, even before you get to being intimidated about the process, seeing things and helping to navigate through certain things, plug it through, you know, on the application.
Yeah.
Man, that's beautiful. I love the way you put that. I love the way you put that. Well, they're certainly going to need, you know, the more information, the better in addressing that issue and knowing who the players are through the help of, you know, platforms like yours. I think that's beautiful, man. Horace, let's talk a little bit about, before we kind of wrap up, man.
Sure.
The piece that you have, and it's interesting you mentioned all of these different things, even the weight that you're putting in this new pivot space. The piece that you have in it, man. Like, I'm not saying that you seem stressed out or anything. You seem more peaceful than anything, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, you're not like, man, we're rolling out this thing, man, and let me tell you this. Like, it seems like you're at peace with the process that you've gone through in building Empower. And not only that, where it's going, man, and then just coming back to that whole, you know, going hard or going home concept, man. Tell me more about that.
So, Greg, I'm gonna tell you. So, I'm gonna give you some philosophical part. I have some truth for that. So, the truth is that I have been running, you know, Empowered's bank account has been a exercise in how much energy I have every day for the last 5 years, right? So, this is the first time. This is the first time that I got 6 months that I have to worry about.
Let's go, baby.
And that gives me some time to sleep.
Yeah.
And in sleep, I have some peace. And it gives me some time to spend with my wife and my family. And in doing that, I have some peace. Yeah. So that's one part of it. It also means that people out there actually believe in what I'm doing because they're saying so with their dollars. There's the other side of it, though, is this. In pivoting to this and in looking at, you know, how we got to this place and everything else, you know, it's this space where, like, for me, and I say go hard or go home, is because I now probably more through the years of experience I've had, through these conversations, because, you know, when you jump in politics as a business and you don't know about politics, it's an intimidating space.
Well, I'll say anything can be, but when you jump into politics, man, because in other industries, it might be a particular service or a particular product. Like, the byproduct of so many things in politics are people, and people could be, boy, oh boy, people could be interesting.
People, boy.
And you can talk to a person on Tuesday, or you can talk to that same person on Thursday, and you're like, you know, like it's interesting.
It's a different animal, and it's not just people, it's leaders.
Sure.
You're talking about an audience of people, whether they be advocates, whether they be activists, whether they be elected officials, whether they be active constituents. All of these people have found some level of power within themselves, and these are the people that you got to deal with every day. So you got to have some level of confidence in what you're doing. And I have spent the last 5 years building that confidence. And what I mean by that is that today, I believe that what we release next is as powerful as it feels to me personally, whereas like this is not, I tell people I'm not a hustler, I'm not even what you call a serial entrepreneur. You know, once this is done, I'm gonna go back and I've learned a lot about other ways I can make money easier. And that's what I'll go focus on once it's all over.
I'm faithful that you'll have different areas that you'll be, you know, you'll be on some 4-hour work week type stuff, man, the way you.
But with Empower, this is something I'm more feel destined to do. And it's something that, you know, because of the way it came to me, because of where I was in my career at the time, like I was already on an upscale. Yeah. And like, I didn't have to leave that, but it just felt right, you know, and then all the people, like my father, like when he first learned about it, my father was a politico, which is why I thought I would never do it. And I remember when he, and God rest his soul, and this isn't like a downer, it's just kind of the story, you know, but he really didn't believe in what I was doing until almost right before he passed. And he said to me, if you're gonna do this, you really gotta care about this shit. And excuse my language, but that is what he said. Yeah. And then I remember the other person named Reggie Bradford, who was really important for me and Press as well, serial entrepreneur in Atlanta, started the company that I worked for that got bought by Oracle, co-founder of WebMD, bunch of stuff, a guy I really looked to for validation. When I first told him I was leaving Oracle to go do this, he was supportive. But then later on, he told me, he said, Horace, I didn't think you knew what the hell you was doing. But he came back to me almost before he passed, because he actually passed 2 years ago. And right after Trump's election, he said, Horace, I think I understand what you're doing here. Because I think I get the vision. So I keep having these experiences, these very divine moments during this process. And I can go on for days about how it keeps happening. But that's where the motivation comes from, because I know it's bigger than me. You know, I don't have to run this forever for me to feel like it's a solution that's necessary. I'm not greedy. You know, God has blessed me in abundance already. I have everything I ever wanted. But right now, I'm like, this is it. And that's why it's go hard to go home. Giving it our team, not just me, the rest of the team and myself, we've all bought in. We're gonna give everything we got. And if you're on this and you know me, I'm probably gonna call you too. If I can send you an email, I'm probably gonna do something where I'm asking you for some help. But just to get us through this last until November, and it's, you know, and I think it'll be worth it. You'll see the work we put in. You know, we're launching it. The official hard launch will be October 1st.
October 1st, okay.
We will have some soft launch previews in September that we will, you know, show some dedicated audiences, so on and so forth. But some more news is coming along as well. But that's kind of the 4-1.
Horace, man, that is, I mean, that's beautiful, man, to have the conversation in this brief moment, have just come full circle around inspiration, motivation, the pivots that you've made, not just in the beginning, but during. The things that you're thinking about right now are the reasons why, you know, I wanted to not just have this platform, you know, but it's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you really on the show as one of the inaugural speakers, man. I think that what you're doing, there's so much purpose in it, man, and it's impacting so many people. Like I'm in the app all the time, man. And I talk about it so much because a lot of folks just don't know who represent them. I was having a conversation, and I won't be long. I said, hey, you know, pre-COVID, folks were a certain way regarding politics and civic engagement. Let's say you kind of sort of knew who represented you from an elected official standpoint. But kind of during and even kind of post-COVID, but especially kind of during, especially right now, you should have Empower and know who those people are. You should not just know who they are, send them an email, give them a phone call, because I think that civic engagement, political engagement will be very different because the stakes are so high not just from the White House, but the stakes are so high for what's happening policy-wise around the corner as we navigate and go into this new norm and things are being defined. And Horace, man, the clearinghouse, the epicenter of information that you built through Empower, brother, I'm gonna talk about it even more. I'm gonna talk about it even more. And so I'm honored. Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying I appreciate it, man, and you're on that short list for the early release, so you'll see it a little sooner than everybody.
I want all the VIP stuff. Give me all of that. Give me everything. You know what I mean?
No
and not just for me, but for Shani too. I'm thinking for two now, man. So yeah, man. But I think that Horace, you've built a phenomenal brand, phenomenal name. We're excited that you're a part of, our extended family, man. We're excited that for what you contribute to the ecosystem, especially in the tech and innovation space. That the future, man, it just looks so bright for what it is that you're building. Continue to let me and our support system know how we can continue to help you, and let people know. Well, I'll add this. I mean, you can find Empower just in your on. I'm an Android user, so in your store, just type the words Empowered in. My Horace's name is the handle, the social media handle, mine as well. So at Get Empowered, follow and stay in tune to what's going on. And Horace, any last words before we sign off, man?
No, just we will be, go to the log on to the social profile, get Empowered, follow that. You can download the current version of Empowered today. We spell it a little differently. It's EMPOWRD. And I would just say, be on the lookout in short time for when we do release the new one. We genuinely believe there's nothing out that exists like it, and I believe that it will be a staple in your life. Going back to my conversations with Larry, one of the first things that we said was that Empowered should be like a calculator. It's not necessarily something that you use every day on your phone, but it's certainly not something you're going to delete. And and that is where we look at it. Like, we want to be something that is a staple in your life, not a trend. And that's what we're aiming for. So, Greg, I appreciate you, brother. As always, you always give me a platform to kind of come up here and talk, and try to talk about some cool stuff every time I do it. So, man, I thank you so much, and also love what you're doing, and love this new platform that you got here and the direction it's headed in, because you can't. I can't separate my spirituality from my entrepreneurial ambition. They are they are one and the same, because I need one to support the other. And so I totally get it, and I think this is much needed.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you, man. And folks, this has been Purpose Driven Pivot, our inaugural episode with Horace Williams. And so y'all enjoy it. Please share. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right, brother. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Thank you.